Okay, let me turn the sound up. Oh, it's up all the way. Okay, just making sure because then you can turn your sound up and hopefully it'll be loud enough. Um, we're going to read our book, Gates of Zion, and we're going to start right where we left off, the Hadassah plot in chapter 14. Yeah, I see that it's a little blurry, but my other one that I can record on had an echo in the sound. So I think the sound is going to be okay for you. Okay. I love you, Mom. I miss you, Mom. Mwah. Okay. Here we go. Hadassah's plot. Silently, Hadassah nursed the short brown stub of his Turkish cigarette. He inhaled the harsh smoke and tapped his cheeks lightly, watching with satisfaction as a string of tiny smoke rings popped from his lips and then lifted into the lobby of the ever-expanding O's. It was a trick he had learned from a tall, blonde lieutenant when they attended Nazi SS commando school together. Hassan glanced at the face of the German-made watch that he was wearing. It was already 6:15. Gerhard was late. Residents of the Hotel Samarius in the suburb of Kataman scurried through the lobby on their way to and from dinner. From the worn velvet red chair in the corner, Hassan studied their faces as they stopped at the mahogany desk and checked with the small, bespectacled manager for messages. Some, he guessed, were Arabs who had lived in the second-story flats above the shops of the Jewish commercial district. When the district had burned, they had fled to the safety of the Hotel Samarius with its potted palms and worn red floral carpets and cheap monthly rates. Here in the heart of a pleasantly mixed Arab and Jewish neighborhood, on the outskirts of the raging fanaticism of the all-Muslim quarters and the burning Zionism of an all-Jewish district, no doubt they felt safe. There was modernation in Kataman. After all, Jews and Arabs lived side by side. Hassan smiled to himself at the innocence of these Christian Arabs. Haj Amin had marked the peaceful neighborhood of Kataman as his own. Soon Gerhardt would come, and the hotel would become the assembly plant for his packages of TNT and the clever letter bombs that tore the hands from anyone unfortunate enough to open one. Then there were the big surprises that Haj Amin and Gerhardt had planned for their Jewish Jerusalem. In the small, neatly furnished suite overlooking the street, every detail would be planned to perfection. Far from being the refuge of the Christian Arab middle class, the hotel had become a headquarters for the Motif's terrorist activists. A large group of men and women burst through the double doors, two old women bundled tightly in shawls, followed by grown sons and daughters and a host of little ones. A tall, stoop-shouldered man in a tweed suit stopped and rang the bell at the desk, then leaned over the counter as the rest of the group clustered in front of the wrought iron gate of the elevator. Two small boys haggled over the right to push the elevator button as the two old women talked above their heads. Hassan had no illusion that the battles about to be fought would be fought for their benefit. No, all would be won for the glory of Haj Amin Husseini, Mutif of Jerusalem, the future ruler of the united land of Palestine. Haj Amin was a name these people feared, and in the end they would be the ones who would lose. They were Arabs, yes, but their kind would be gone before the final line was written. In the end, it made little difference. Hassan gasped and turned as he felt an iron grip on the shoulder. The grim face of Gerhardt stared down at him, and he wore the same heavy tweed coat that he had worn the night they had been seen by the girl and the little boy. A broad-brimmed fedora was pulled down low over his cruel, steely gaze of his ice-blue eyes. "Well, my friend," he said softly, "are you ready to finish the job you left undone?" Ugh. Casually, Hassan inhaled the cigarette one last time, then flicked the ash onto the carpet and crushed out the red-hot tip with his fingers. He dropped the remaining stub in the shirt pocket of his police uniform. The boy is still at Hadassah, an easy target. I thought perhaps we might have a bit to eat before we finish him. You can eat later, growled Gerhardt. Why the impatience, my friend? Hassan rose and faced him as he pulled on his coat. It is the impatience of Haj Amin that I worry about if I were you. Gerhardt smiled grimly and turned toward the stairway, leaving Hassan without an appetite. The night was cold and the stars hung like fragments of ice against the sky. Hassan pulled the collar of his overcoat up and around his ears and wished that he had stolen an enclosed vehicle rather than an open jeep. He passed through the Arab neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, and at the foot of Mount Scopus, he felt the sensation of satisfaction as he looked at the blazing lights of Hadassah Hospital atop Scopus. He would be able, he was sure, to finish his assignment and then fade away into anonymity of Sheikh Jarrah before the last drop of the boy's blood spilled on the floor. He shifted into first gear as he rounded the last curve before the climb up Mount Scopus, commanding the highest ground in the area. The hospital, the Hebrew University, would certainly be a Jewish stronghold in the days ahead. But, Hassan noted with satisfaction, their locations were deep inside the Arab suburbs and would make them easy enough to strangle. He would mention it to the Motif when he reported their final disposal of the little Jew witness. He glanced at his watch. Nearly 7 o'clock. He pulled into the parking lot of the hospital and parked in a restricted area reserved for official cars. No one would notice the army jeep there among so many others. He set the brake and ran his hair quickly along the side of his leg, to his boot top and the narrow handle of the dagger hidden there. All in all, he thought, this should not take more than a few minutes. He hopped from the jeep and strode purposely past a British guard who saluted smartly when he touched the brim of his hat. It was still early when he passed through the doors of the hospital's main entrance. Perhaps there was even time for a quick cup of coffee in the cafeteria to warm his hands after the drive in the chill of the night air. The crowd on the first floor of the hospital cafeteria had thinned out considerably. Hassan sat in the far corner across from a group of 3 buxom nurses who gossiped and giggled throughout their break. Hassan took a last bite of strudel and slurped down his coffee, cursing Gerhardt for the urgency which had sent him off to finish the little Jew. I would have had time, he thought glumly, to eat a good meal. The lights in the rooms were only now winking out as shift doctors and nurses came and went. He scrapped the tasteless cafeteria food to the side of his plate and stacked the silverware and coffee cup on top. Then he left the sterile room for a now near empty lobby. He considered taking the elevator to the 5th floor, but thought better of it, certain that some sharp-eyed nurse would stop him at her station. He pushed the heavy swinging door open, marked stairway, and began to climb the slow climb to the pediatric ward, room 529, where the boy rested. His footsteps echoed loudly in the stairwell. Once a nurse pushed open a door on the floor above him and skipped past him on her way down. I hate to wait for that elevator, she said cheerily. Hassan nodded and tipped his hat, but said nothing in reply. He hoped the boy would be sleeping soundly. It certainly would make his task easier. A quick slash of the knife, and like the Jewish butchers said, Yaakov Lebowitz would be dead the kosher way, his blood draining painlessly and silently from his body. From the small glass portal that reinforced the wire, Hassan watched a nurse rattle down the dim corridor with a metal cart full of medication. He stared at the large red numbers on the arrows on the wall, pointing which way to the little Jew's room. Rooms 520 and 529 were to his left, the opposite direction the nurse had taken. He smiled at the wave of excitement he felt, and then he bent and touched the handle of his knife once again. He pushed the door open a crack and watched with satisfaction as the nurse disappeared around a corner. Soft light reflected on the shiny floor of the nurse's station. Hassan was out of view of the nurse, who sat behind a large desk flipping through pages of a magazine. He slipped from the stairwell into the corridor, careful not to let the leather soles of his shoes squeak on the freshly scrubbed tiles. He walked close to the wall, passing the rooms, smelling of antiseptic and urine, cursing the fact that 529 was at the very end of the hall. A child swathed in white moaned as he passed the open door of 525. He glanced at the bars around the bed and imagined the red blood of Yakov soaking the sheets, and then the panic that would echo through the hallway when the deed of Ibrahim El Hassan was discovered with the first light of the morning. He wished that he could be on hand to watch, even toyed with the idea of returning to the hospital in the morning. The wooden door of room 529 was closed. Hassan gingerly pushed it open, knowing the boy's eyes were bandaged and that he would not be awakened by the light. A cruel smile danced across his lips, and he felt intoxicated as he slipped the knife from his boot top and tiptoed into the room. Then his smile faded. There before him in the darkness, not the bed of one small Jewish child, but 20 beds occupied by 20 sleeping children. He turned with a gasp, bumping into... wait, I gotta find the right page. An arm, bumping his arm hard on the large metal crib. His knife clattered to the floor, and the child cried out at the noise. Hassan backed up behind the door in anticipation of a nurse scuttling into the room. Beads of sweat formed on his brow and trickled down his temple onto his collar. Slowly his eyes began to adjust to the semi-darkness. When no nurse appeared, the only sound was the steady breathing of the children. He allowed himself to relax and step forward. He decided, simply search the sleeping faces. He tiptoed to the first bed, then turned away immediately as he noticed a small leg encased in plaster and raised upward in traction. The next bed held a little girl whose long dark hair fanned over the pillow. As he peeped down at her, she moaned and thrashed as if sensing something evil was near. He stepped away, brushing the foot of her bed with his fingers. 2, he counted wordlessly. Then he lowered his face close to the pillow of the next child, his breathing causing the little one to turn away. There were no bandages on the child's eyes. Hassan crept silently to the next. Before him was a tiny form of a child whose head was swathed in bandages. He felt he was in luck. He toyed with the blade of the knife before he raised a limp arm to check the identification band. "I want a drink of water," a sleepy voice. Hassan dropped the arm and raised the knife to strike. "What is your name, boy?" Hassan whispered softly. "Michael, I want a drink." "Shut up," Hassan whispered menacingly. "Where does Yakov sleep?" "On the end," came the whimpering reply. Hassan straightened himself, touching the foot of each bed as he passed. He stole to the end of the beds. Nearest the window there was a light and a shadow of the city lights. He could make out the dim figure of Yakov. "I came for you," he said with a cruel edge to his voice, and then he touched the neck of his victim and raised his knife to strike. The child he had awakened loudly cried out, and Hassan hesitated a moment. Then Yakov, awakened with a start, bolted upright. "Shal!" he cried, "Shal!" And in an instant the ward was a mass of crying children. Hassan backed up against the window. Then as the door was flung open and harsh lights of the ward flicked on, he smashed the window and lunged onto the fire escape. He clambered down the tiny steel ladder to the second-floor balcony, opened the window, and slipped into the darkness of a deserted room. He sprinted towards the door and into the hallway and ran to the emergency stairs, smashing into the same nurse who had greeted him only a few moments before. As he reached the floor lobby, he barely paused a second, and then he strode out. "There is a terrorist on the 5th floor!" he cried to a group of British soldiers. As they ran toward the stairs and elevator, he calmly walked out to the stolen jeep and disappeared into the streets of Sheikh Jarrah. Okay, that is over 15 minutes. I'm trying to keep track because I'm not supposed to do over 15 minutes. I don't know if it'll come or not, Mom. The Haganah is the next chapter, 15. I'll read it for you and send it to you and look for it. I'm trying to keep on my time frame. I'm a big blabber. I love you, Mom. Mwah. I'm scared for Yaakov. Okay,